Well, I'm excited this morning. Dr. Rick Langer is with us again. We've had a week with him that we call like a pastoral residency. I know some of you are like, well, that's a short residency, but it's like a time of focus with somebody. He was with us last Sunday. If you missed that, it was an amazing talk just around right-sizing our fears in light of the greatness of our God. And to reinforce, like, he didn't say don't have fears going into these election times. He's just like, right-size them and compare to who God is. On Monday, he spent time with our staff, which was amazing. He also spent time with our elders on Monday. Wednesday night, he gave an amazing talk with us all around convictions and the issue. The thing that I love that he said so much was like, we have conflict not because of our convictions, but because our convictions are often half-cooked. Like they're not really based on anything except some reaction. So how important it is the body of Christ to have convictions, but deeply rooted ones that make sense. So he's here again with us this morning. He has a special message for us. He is an author. He was a professor at Biola University. He works with a group around winsome convictions about how to really bring unity and convictions back to people in our country and our world when we tend to disagree and push away so often. So welcome with me, and I appreciate him so much, Dr. Rick Langer.
Thank you, Dale. Good to be back with all you guys. I had a great time. This has been really fun. I've thoroughly enjoyed the area, enjoyed the church, enjoyed meeting and talking with many of you. So thank you for your hospitality. I'd like to begin this morning with a question that probably isn't burning on your mind, but perhaps before we're done, you will understand why I care about this. I just am wondering when the last time it was that you turned to your spouse or whoever, your roommates or whoever it might be, and said to them, hey, let's pack up the kids and go out and get some spinach. See, I'm thinking that isn't usually what we do. We don't go to McDonald's and order spinach. And you might say, well, that's because they don't sell it. Okay, that is a good reason not to order it there. But I'm suspicious the reason they don't sell it is that you wouldn't buy it there if they did. Now, I actually don't mind spinach. I like it. I'll have it in spinach salads and things like that. I'm not opposed to spinach, but somehow spinach isn't a thing that moves the needle. It isn't a thing that makes us get out and go get it, despite the fact that everyone seems to know, or at least agree, that spinach is actually good for you. It's a thing that we should desire. It's a thing that many of us do actually enjoy, but somehow we just don't get that worked up about spinach. I mean, seriously, when's the last time you went to like In-N-Out and ordered, spinach, I'll get a double-double. It just doesn't really work in our minds, right? So I'm thinking about spinach. You may wonder why. My feeling is that spinach is sort of the food equivalent of the virtue of gentleness. It's a thing that we know is probably good and good for us. Many of us don't mind it at all, but somehow the number of people who say, what do you want to be when you grow up, Johnny? I want to be gentle. Oh, I thought you want to be president. I thought you want to be a fighter pilot, football player. I don't know, something that has a little bit more pizzazz. And gentleness seems to have this sort of like, take it for grantedness about it. The other thing, so number one, gentleness seems to us to be a little bit, there's kind of a spinach analogy there. The other thing that I've discovered is that gentleness, when it's affirmed, is often affirmed what you might call pragmatically. So let me just read. This is part of what got me thinking on this was a blog post that I read by a guy named James Wood, I believe he's a historian, a scholar. And he was writing about Tim Keller. And Tim Keller, as you probably know, well-known pastor, passed away recently. And this came out just shortly before he did pass away. But he said Tim Keller's winsome, gentle, and loving way of speaking in the public square, he was talking about that. I said, I've always admired that about Tim Keller. But he's worried that the time for winsomeness has passed. We once lived in a neutral world Christianity was sort of an idiosyncratic, but neutral lifestyle. In other words, like, yeah, that's their funky thing to do, but whatever. But now we live in a negative world. Christianity is perceived as immoral and undermining the social good. And Wood felt that Keller's gentleness was well suited to the neutral world, but it is no longer viable in the negative world that now dominates our culture. And whatever else you think about this little line of thought, I just want to point out that when Wood is thinking of gentleness, he's thinking about it as a pragmatic strategy. Does gentleness pay off? And he's saying there was a time when it did, when Christianity was kind of neutral relative to our culture, but now that there's an animosity towards it, gentleness won't work anymore, so presumably this isn't the time to be gentle. But here's the problem. Whether there's a good time to be gentle or a bad time to be gentle, what if gentleness is actually commanded of us in Scripture? Do we only do it because it tastes good then? Do we only do it because it seems to work? It seems like, hey, this is one of these times when a soft answer might turn away wrath. So, okay, fine, I'll be gentle, but I have no need to cultivate that or develop that at any sort of a personal level. I got to thinking about this when I was asked to speak at Talbot Chapel, and they had a series, kind of a year-long series they were doing, so the speakers, as they were coming in, were supposed to kind of fit into that series. And it was about thinking biblically, particularly in a culture that is laced with what you might call cultural relativism. Relativism towards truth, relativism towards ethics, and kind of like the anything-goesness. And so the message here is let's think biblically in a culture and in a time when everything is driven by cultural relativism. So I got to think about this, and I said, yeah, I like this. Let's think biblically about gentleness. And so that's what I'd like to do this morning, is to take a little bit of time. Now, you're probably sitting there thinking, you've just told us that nobody really likes gentleness. Why are you trying to sell it to us? Let me just say, number one, because of my biblical concerns, which I'm just about to get to, but the other thing that I do want to say is that gentleness, I'm perhaps a bit like spinach, because like I say, I actually like it. Gentleness tastes better than you think it does when you actually commit yourself to practice it. So let me dive a little bit into this issue of gentleness. And my worry that really drives me is that when we view gentleness as somehow optional, a thing you do when it works, or you do because you like, or in a moment that you like it, when we're doing all of that, if the Bible views gentleness as mandatory, then I guess I have a question. Have we become moral relativists regarding gentleness? And let me point out, when I say someone is a moral relativist, like, for example, if we say you're a moral relativist relative to your sexual ethics, we sometimes talk about that and say, so anything goes and who cares? The point of being a moral relativist about things like that is not that you never do the right thing. It's that you only do the right thing when you feel like it. You do it because it goes, yeah, that feels right to me at this moment. And so you do it. And most people I know who I might consider to be, for example, moral relativists regarding their sexual ethics, they don't run around having sex with everybody all the time. They don't, blow everything up. The point is, they don't have any boundary that would keep them from doing any particular action if they really wanted to. And my question is, do we have any boundaries relative to something like gentleness that would keep us being gentle even when we really didn't want to? Or have we just become moral relativists regarding gentleness? Now, lest you think I'm pointing at one side or the other, it's actually instructive and helpful to stop and think, what is going on in our cultural moment that I would point my finger at and say, yeah, this is what I mean about us perhaps abandoning gentleness. On those who lean on the progressive stripe, here's things that I have heard people say. You can't invoke gentleness and respect when someone's knee is on your throat. In fact, the reason people appeal for gentleness and respect is they don't want to confront the structures of oppression that permeate our society. Civility is a tool used to silence the voice of the disenfranchised. Who needs civility? I actually got this in response to an early draft of our book, Winsome Conviction, about one of the chapters we had in it. So we added a whole chapter on civility in response to this comment. Those on the conservative side have their own version of what you might call anti-gentleness. When elections are stolen, there is no time for civility. The time for gentle words is past. We aren't going to bow to the cultural elite any longer. We have to, quote, own the libs, boldly speaking conservative thought in ways that are infuriating, flummoxing, and otherwise distressing to liberals. This is a direct quote. Love that line. That is what we are to do. The time for gentleness is past. We need to go flummox those liberals. And interestingly enough, those who live in the center, not just politically, but perhaps even emotionless, those who might be more drawn to gentleness, have their own challenge. I'm seeing a lot of people who live somewhere between these extremes, being considered soft-headed, liberal, and unbiblical by the conservatives, or self-righteous, ignorant, racist, and unbiblical by the progressives. The good news is, no matter who you talk to, these people are unbiblical. Fewer and fewer people standing between these extremes, therefore, are willing to speak up. And they miss gentleness by a lack of courage. Because in the midst of a polarized society, to speak up for the other side, to speak up for gentleness, to perhaps be interpreter between two people, is usually to be disdained, to be doubted, to have your biblical commitments questioned, or your ability to see the injustice of our culture questioned. And so we remain silent. So the bottom line is, gentleness is losing on every side. So let me speak a few words in defense of gentleness. As I promised, I would like to have this really not so much be my words as biblical words on this. And I want to kind of cast a vision for why I think biblical teaching on gentleness raises to the level of really being something that's mandatory, that we should be taking seriously and aspiring to. So let me begin by thinking about what Jesus models for us regarding gentleness. Here is his own self-description. He invites us to take his yoke upon us, for he is gentle and lowly in spirit, and you will find rest for your souls, he promises, if you do this. This isn't just Jesus' self-description, it's explicitly offered as an example for us to imitate. So it isn't a thing that works for him, but not for us. He's saying, no, here's what I do. You've probably seen me in action. You do it as well, and guess what you will find? You will find rest for your souls. So it is a command with a promise to imitate the person of Jesus Christ. And I can't really think of anything more central to Christian discipleship than being Christ-like. And being Christ-like, it appears, would involve being lowly and gentle in spirit. Another interesting thing about Jesus, gentleness is not just his personality type. It's a fulfillment of prophecy. So here's what, just a little bit later in Matthew, the next chapter of Matthew, here's what Matthew writes. Matthew 12, 18 through 21, many followed him, and he healed them all and ordered them not to make him known. That's an interesting side point I won't get into. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. And here's what Isaiah said. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will proclaim justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel or cry aloud, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not quench, until he brings justice to victory, and in his name the Gentiles hope. That's really interesting to think about. It isn't that Jesus took strength finders and found out he had gentleness as one of his strengths. That's not what happened here. Literally, his gentleness was a mandatory fulfillment of prophecy that had been made about him 700 years earlier by Isaiah. And notice the craziest thing about this passage is apparently Jesus thinks he can advocate for social justice on behalf of the disenfranchised, like the Gentiles, that he can advocate for social justice for them gently. That he can do that without quarreling, crying aloud, breaking a bruised reed, or quenching a flickering wick. It's pretty remarkable. Gentleness, as you probably already know, is also a fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5:25 and 26. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against these sorts of things, there's no law. Now, in case you don't like my whole gentleness argument, I am happy to say maybe gentleness isn't my favorite word either. I just picked it up because it was there. But if you really don't like it, let me recommend that you go through the same whole process and say, okay, we've decided we aren't going to do gentleness. What are you going to do about kindness? What are you going to do about goodness? What are you going to do about self-control? You know what? By the time you work your way through the fruit of the Spirit, you suddenly realize gentleness isn't really your biggest problem. Your biggest problem is the whole package. The whole package is just sort of reverberations of gentleness done with different, they probably had an early version of a, computer that was generating synonyms there, because there they all are. There they all are. And these are the things that are the fruit of the Spirit. Unlike the gifts of the Spirit, where one person may get one gift and another person get another gift, and there's no need, if you have the gift of teaching, for you to go get the gift of service. And if you have the gift of service, you don't need the gift of administration. The point is, we're each apportioned a gift by the Holy Spirit as He wills. So there's no particular problem if you say, I don't have that particular gift. Let me just point out, the fruit of the Spirit is really different. Number one, it's the fruit singular of the Spirit. It isn't like the gifts of the Spirit that are plural. The fruit of the Spirit is singular. And the bottom line is, this is simply what happens. This is what grows on a tree whose roots are sunk into the soil of Christ, who draws nourishment from the grace of God and bears fruit. Oh, what kind of fruit is it? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control fruit. Ever seen one of those citrus fruits where they graft down all the different branches? So on one tree, you can have a grapefruit and an orange and a lemon and a lime and all those kind of things. Welcome to the fruit of the Spirit. That's the kind of thing it is. All of Christ has been grafted onto the tree. The Spirit nourishes that tree, and the fruit it bears is the fruit of Christ-likeness. You don't get to opt out of your least favorite fruit of the Spirit. Never have like being kind. I think I'll just be mean, but the other ones I'm good with. Doesn't work that way. It's what happens in your heart when you give the Spirit free rein to bear the sort of fruit that He would want to bear. So, fruit of the Spirit. Another thing is that gentleness is the apostles' appeal for the body of Christ. This is the thing that he pleads with us for. So in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, he says, walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called. You've been called to Jesus. You've been called to follow God incarnate in the person of Christ. He says, I want you to walk in a manner worthy of that calling. And the first thing he identifies, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love. Notice all the fruit of the Spirit are making a reappearance here. This is exactly the sort of thing that I'm trying to say, is that this just is what happens when you follow Christ. Be worthy of him in walking in humility and gentleness and patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. This is what the Apostle Paul, when he's sitting in prison, wondering about how the church is doing, this is what he's praying, begging, pleading for the church to do. To walk in all humility and gentleness, to be patient, to bear with one another in love, in order that we might preserve the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. Gentleness is also a qualification for leadership. So when it comes time to look at biblical lists for what qualifies a person to be in a leadership position, here's what we discover in 1 Timothy chapter 3. Therefore, an overseer, an elder, must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, and hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, and not a lover of money. Gentleness, not quarrelsomeness, are required qualifications for elders. It's interesting to, when you read job qualifications in modern America, it's like you need to have a doctor's degree or a master's degree in this or that. You need to have X many years of experience. You have all of those sorts of things listed. The things we never list are character qualities. It's really interesting when you see a biblical list of what qualifies you to be an elder. It doesn't say that you studied under the foot of Gamaliel and you have the official certificate that you did that. It's not on the list. What's on the list is a whole truckload of character qualities. Those are the things that he says this qualifies a person to lead in the body of Christ. Completely unsurprising, given the plea that he just made for the body of Christ right before, in Ephesians chapter 4. He says, I want you guys to be marked by this wonderful unity and patience and forbearance. How is that going to happen? By having leaders who are marked by that. And the operating assumption that's hidden in this combination is that you tend to imitate the character of those who are your leaders. So make sure your leaders have this character. Gentleness is looking pretty good biblically at this point, I just want to say. And we're not done yet. Gentleness is not only essential for those who are dealing with others within the body of Christ, gentleness is an essential part of our testimony to the non-believing world. It's essential for our response to non-believers. 1 Peter 3:15. He says, in your hearts honor Christ as Lord, Christ the Lord as holy. Always be prepared to give a defense for anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. I have taught for 20 years at Talbot. I hang out with a lot of our folks in the apologetics department. My PhD's in philosophy. I spend a lot of time talking with people who live in the apologetics philosophy world. It's interesting how easy it is for those of us, and I will include myself in this, who live in that world to eagerly say we need to give a defense to anyone for the hope that is within us, and how easy it is to neglect doing that with gentleness and respect. Tim Muehlhoff and I, my colleague who I've worked on the Winsome Conviction Project with, we both have done a fair number of things with apologetic stuff. And we've started trying to sell the idea of doing, and we've had some success at this, of doing a Winsome Conviction pre-conference to an apologetics conference. To just say, how are we going to convey the truths that we are about to learn? What spirit will we bring to the apologetic engagement? I think I'm particularly sensitive to this because of an experience I had when I was in college. My roommate was a pretty new Christian. I'd met him, I was part of Campus Crusade. He came to Christ, I think, perhaps just before he came to college. So I was involved in discipleship, and so he was a pretty new Christian. And at the end of our freshman year, we had some guys come along who were doing creation evolution debate kind of things on campus. And so the guy came and gave a couple of talks. And it was really interesting talking to my friend after these talks. He'd come out to them. And everyone was all excited about what they'd heard, except he was kind of not. And I talked to him, he didn't say much, and then the next year we were roommates, and when he came back, he'd kind of lost his faith over the summer, and I said, well, tell me the story, what happened? And he pointed his finger back to that moment, and he just said, I don't know whether he won or lost the debate, but I know that he lost me because of the tenor and the combativeness with which he communicated. And this is what Peter appears to be concerned about, that we have an answer, but we convey it with gentleness and respect. Another thing that we discover as we read through about gentleness in Scripture is gentleness is essential for the restoration when a person has fallen into sin or moral failure. Galatians chapter 6, verse 1. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. It's easy to think that when a person fails as a moral failure, the thing they need to hear is words of judgment or words of anger. They're incurring the wrath of God, so to speak, because of the sin that they've committed. And there is an element of truth to that. In other words, we do run afoul of God's moral will at our peril. But notice Paul's statement about how do we respond when a person has done that, has failed. He says you need to restore that person. So it's not okay to let them keep doing what they were doing. But the way you do that is, interestingly enough, in a spirit of gentleness. So gentleness isn't actually geared just for when things are going good, right? It's geared for helping out when things are going bad, when you're dealing with a person who has perhaps just had a moral failure. Or, to go even beyond that, gentleness even seems to work when people have been deceived by the devil himself. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 24 through 26. And the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone. Again, you're picking up that theme. Able to teach, patiently enduring evil, and correcting his opponents with gentleness. God may perhaps grant them repentance leading to knowledge of the truth, and they may get this, and they may come to their senses and escape from the snare of the devil after being captured by him to do his will. Wow. I don't think it gets much worse than being captured by the devil and actually doing the devil's will, right? What is it that we need to do if we find one of them? Well, it appears that we need to restore them in a spirit of gentleness. It's pretty amazing how ubiquitous gentleness is in the New Testament and how effective it actually seems to be in every setting. I'm highly suspicious of people who say there was a time when gentleness worked, but now is not that time. I think they need to read more. I think they need to read more because it seems in the Bible that almost any context you could think of, gentleness apparently applies. Let me conclude my quick biblical survey here with a few words from James. James 3, 13 through 18. This is one of my favorite passages on this when I have signed books, my Winsome Conviction book, when people want me to sign it or something, I'll always include a reference to James chapter 3, verses 17 and 18. Here's what James writes. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show his work in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but it is an earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, then gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvestness of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Those are pretty strong words from James. And let me just highlight a few things that he's pointing out. This false wisdom, this what you might call the anti-gentle wisdom from below, not the wisdom from above, he describes as actually being unspiritual and demonic. It's false to the truth. Notice the phraseology there is using is kind of like the language we'd use for heresy, right? It is a false teaching. It's false to the truth. He says this isn't gentleness as mere courtesy or kindness here. He uses the language of spiritual battle, heresy, false teaching. I don't think he could use stronger language than what he uses in this passage. And this is why I don't think we should be moral relativists, or I would say James doesn't think we should be, when it comes to gentleness, respect, humility, and openness to reason. Now, I don't want to fight over the meaning of heresy or apostasy. Do I want to call someone a heretic because they're feeling to be gentle? That's a trip I'd rather not take. That's a battle I'd rather not fight. But let me just make this point. Does a persistent and unrepentant refusal to practice gentleness and respect towards others count as evidence against the genuineness of one's profession to follow Christ? And let me just make the point, we're properly cautious about saying this just strictly based on another person's behavior, but we rightly point out that certain behaviors make us doubt the genuineness of a person's profession of faith. You know people who are just unrepentantly committed to sin and are living in sin, and you're not suddenly doubting your theology of salvation, you're doubting the genuineness of their profession. You just go, the fruit that I'm seeing doesn't match up with the root of the Spirit. Hopefully you don't decide that you know that for sure. I'm just saying that that is one of those concerns that you find arising biblically when people say this conduct isn't compatible with good standing with Christ. I'm simply pointing out what it seems James is using that language to describe those who refuse to practice gentleness and respect. So, if the New Testament consistently, relentlessly commands us to speak with gentleness, humility, peacefulness, and respect, and if we relentlessly refuse to do so, it should make us stop and think about how committed we really are to faithfully following Christ. Perhaps we become, at the very least, not heretics, but moral relativists regarding gentleness. And let me just point out, I'm really not encouraging you to apply that to others as much as to have a moment and stop and think about this yourself and just say, how am I doing with this? Now, I have given this talk before. I have talked to other people about this, and people will, I can hardly finish getting this out, and people say, well, what about Jesus cleansing the temple? He turned over all those tables and whitewashed sepulchres. That's not very nice, gentle language. And so we will latch onto these phrases. Paul, for heaven's sakes, he recommends that these Judaizers just go all the way. If you're a fan of circumcision, go all the way and do the castration thing. This is pretty strong language. So Rick, well, let me just say, so Rick, what? What is it you want to say with that? Do you want to say that really all those gentle commands in Scripture aren't commands of Scripture? Do you want to say that I know people think Jesus was nice, but he really wasn't? He was just angry a lot, and you always meet him turning over tables in temples. And I think when you stop to think about this, you realize, oh, there is a prevailing ethos in Jesus that is in keeping with gentleness, and likewise with Paul. That there may be exceptions to that behavior, I'm happy to grant. And let me point out, whenever you identify something as a moral absolute or a thing that you have, you are almost never saying that is the only thing you ever need to worry about. Because you should not kill, who cares if you commit adultery? That would be really bad thinking, right? But the thing that we often discover is sometimes our moral absolutes push and pull against us. And the thing that we always feel obliged to do when that happens is give some good account of reason about why we might be honoring one at the apparent expense of another. Sometimes say it isn't really giving this up or whatever you do, but you feel that tension. And what really bothers me is I talk to people who feel no tension at all when they get rid of their gentleness, when they get rid of their humility, when they get rid of their kindness. The other thing I'd point out that one of the prefaces to Jesus saying some of the things he said before cleansing the temple and even towards the Pharisees is this wonderful comment. Jesus knowing what was in their hearts. And let me stop and ask, have you taken the time before you speak an ungentle word to know what is in the heart of the other person? I doubt that you can do that as completely as Jesus did, but you can probably take the time to at least find that out. I find we rarely do. In fact, our anti-gentle moments are usually spontaneous and more raging moments. And then we'll get in a posture of doing that, and we live in a world that now is doing that raging, so we don't even think twice when we do it. And I would want to say, like any other moral issue, you should be very concerned when you have to suddenly tell a lie to save the Jews who are hiding in your basement. That may be the decision that you make, but you shouldn't feel, hey, no big deal about lying, or no big deal about turning over the people because I had to tell the truth. Whatever you did, you have this sort of a sense of capture about it. And I would argue that Jesus and Paul are also concerned about issues dealing with people's eternal salvation. The context in Matthew, he's worried about people committing blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, the unpardonable sin. That's what's on the stake. He isn't really complaining about the latest bill on gun control or immigration or whether or not we're getting vaccines. That's not where he's flipping over the tables. And I'm worried that now we'll flip over the tables about anything. So those are my concerns. Let me close by just giving a couple of comments about some of the gifts, some of the things that make gentleness attractive. As I mentioned before, this is part of my concern, is that we don't just say, oh, this thing we have to do, but I won't like it. There's some wonderful things that grow in the fruit of the soil of gentleness. And then I want to give a few tips on how do we actually cultivate that. First, some of the things that grow in the soil of gentleness. Community. Anti-gentle postures like strife, wrath, and pride are always associated with division in the Bible. If you want to be united in the body of Christ, gentleness is required. A physical body is a good metaphor. We always treat our own body parts with gentleness. If our foot hurts, we adjust our gait. I do a lot of running. Something's always hurting. It's like the great law of running, if run, then hurt. But what happens when I do that is I treat that body part gently. I had plantar fasciitis for like 2 years. My foot and heel really hurt. Can you imagine me having that condition going, I'll teach that heel to hurt me, you know? When it hurts, you treat it with gentleness. Why? Because it's part of your body. It's part of your body. And gentleness is one of the things that allows us to live in community. Faith. Faith, because gentleness relinquishes some of the assertive control that we might have over outcomes. We trust God to bring about His will, not ourselves to bring about our vision of His will. Gentleness requires a trust that God will act on your behalf. Not that you do nothing, but that you don't have to do everything. You let some things go. And that requires faith, that God will pick those up. Peace. Gentleness grows both internal and external peace. Internally, the life of the easy yoke. We take Jesus' yoke upon us, as He says, the yoke of a gentle and lowly spirit, and as a result, we find rest for our souls, internal rest. Externally, a community of souls who found rest is the surest way to a community of peace, because all those who make it up are people who found their rest in Jesus. Reconciliation. Gentleness opens the door to healing and hearing. Our present approach to injustice celebrates calling things out. And if that doesn't work, we shout louder and meaner. You're not just a racist, you're a white supremacist and a Nazi. Okay? You're not just woke or a lib, you're a heretic or a commie. We certainly can't paper things over and say peace, peace, when there is no peace. But note, gentleness is not about failing to speak out, but about how we speak out. Disrupting, disconstructing, dismantling, deconstructing were once viewed as necessary evils. Now they're viewed as positive virtues. But no one has a vision for how to move from disrupting and deconstructing to reconciliation and harmony. And I would suggest that gentleness might help in that regard. Perhaps you're sold. Perhaps you're saying, yes, it would be good to cultivate a little gentleness. Let me just close by giving you a couple of quick tips on this. Here's a good thing to ask yourself if you want to foster gentleness. Am I tweeting in the key of gentleness. Now, of course, tweeting is a placekeeper for any social media activity that you do. And the reason I mention social media is not so much because of all the things people say about social media, when you're not face-to-face, say mean things. All of those things, they're probably true. Here's one of the helpful things for spiritual formation regarding social media is it tends to keep track of what you said. You can file back through a year or two's worth of posts. You can file back through a week or two, depending upon how often you do that, and say, what key have I been tweeting in? The key of wrath, the key of anger, the key of gentleness, the key of humility. It's an interesting thing to just stop and think, how have I been speaking? Here's another good thing to think about, just using that social media metaphor. If all of your tweets were to go viral, would the world have more peace or more strife? You've got a track record for those who use social media. It's good to stop and think about that. Here's another one, perhaps even more important for many of us, because I don't do that much tweeting, but I do a fair bit of clicking. Here's a good thing to ask yourself. Am I clicking in the key of gentleness? Or am I clicking for outrage? Am I clicking on the things that I can't believe Pelosi said, I can't believe Trump said, I can't believe her. And it's interesting, the people who do social media have discovered there's no question we click the most on the things that make us most angry and upset. The things that give us this therapeutic, kind of the equivalent of a latte and a pumpkin latte in a fireplace, we don't click on. We click on things that make our sight go red. Bit of wisdom comes from Sitting Bull on this point. Someone was interviewing him, and he said, inside me there are two dogs. One is mean and evil, the other is good, and they fight each other all the time. And the person who's interviewing asked, well, which one's winning? And Sitting Bull said, whichever one I feed. If you find in your heart one side that's wanting to engage in the anger and wrath, the other side that wants to say, no, I need to practice the fruit of the Spirit, let me just suggest that whichever one you feed is the one you're likely to see win. Click on things that might foster your gentleness. For the next week, here's a thought. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, click on these things. I realize your mouse may feel like it's retired because there's nothing to click on, but you might find a few of those things if you're looking for them. So that would be my encouragement. And then finally, simply praying that God would make you gentle. To say, Lord, I need to be this in a culture that's not this way. I won't learn this from those who are around me. I won't learn this from the TV. I won't learn this from social media. I will learn this from your word and by means of the Spirit working in my heart. Lord, give me a gentle spirit. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we are grateful for your word that I think in cases like this reminds us of things that probably deep in our soul we know, but are so easily, so consistently pushed aside by so many of the things we see in the media, so many things we see around us, so many things we hear in the workplace. So Lord, I pray, help us to hear the voice of your Spirit in our hearts, saying this is the way, walk in it. Help us be people who model Christ-like gentleness to a world who desperately needs to hear your message. And we pray this in Jesus' name, amen.